Alaska, often referred to as the last frontier, now faces a new frontier: economic isolation. This vast and rugged state, known for its breathtaking landscapes and resilient communities, is now grappling with an unprecedented challenge. A trade war between the United States and Canada has taken a drastic turn, leaving Alaskans grappling with rising costs and dwindling supplies. The once steady flow of goods has been disrupted, causing a ripple effect that touches every corner of Alaskan life. The culprit? New tolls imposed by British Columbia on American vehicles traveling to Alaska on the Alaska Highway. These tolls have created a financial burden for transport companies, which in turn has been passed down to consumers. This vital artery, connecting the lower 48 to the nation's largest state, has become a choke point, threatening Alaska's economic lifeline. The highway, once a symbol of freedom and mobility, now stands as a barrier to prosperity. Supermarkets are struggling to keep shelves stocked. Essential items like fresh produce, dairy, and meat are becoming scarce, forcing residents to make difficult choices. Gas stations are rationing fuel. Long lines and limited supplies have become the new norm, adding to the daily stress of Alaskan life. And the cost of everyday goods has skyrocketed, leaving Alaskans wondering how long this crisis will last. From groceries to household items, the financial strain is palpable. The Alaska Highway, once a symbol of unity and cooperation between the two countries, has become a point of contention. Its history is rich, built during World War II as a military supply route, and it has since transformed into a vital lifeline for Alaska, facilitating the flow of essential goods, services, and people. Built during World War II as a military supply route, the highway has since transformed into a vital lifeline for Alaska, facilitating the flow of essential goods, services, and people. This historical route has always been more than just a road; it is a testament to the resilience and cooperation of the past. Now, the very road that connects Alaska to the rest of the U.S. has become a barrier, driving a wedge between communities and threatening the livelihoods of countless Americans. The tolls have not only increased costs but have also caused significant delays, affecting businesses and families alike. The situation is dire, demanding urgent attention from both Washington and Ottawa. Leaders from both nations must come together to find a solution, as the stakes are too high for inaction. The future of Alaska's economy and the well-being of its residents hang in the balance. The current crisis is a symptom of a larger trade war brewing between the United States and Canada. Tit-for-tat tariffs, imposed on goods ranging from steel and aluminum to lumber and dairy, have strained the historically close relationship. The Trump administration's protectionist policies, aimed at reducing the trade deficit and boosting American manufacturing, have been met with retaliatory measures from Canada, sparking a trade war that shows no signs of abating. The trade war, initially focused on manufactured goods, has now spilled over into other sectors, ensnaring transportation and logistics in its crosshairs. The tolls imposed by British Columbia on the Alaska Highway are widely seen as retaliation for U.S. tariffs on Canadian lumber. The Canadian government argues that the tolls are necessary to offset the economic damage caused by American protectionism. Meanwhile, the U.S. government condemns the tolls as unfair and discriminatory, accusing Canada of holding Alaska hostage in the trade dispute. The new toll policy, implemented by the government of British Columbia, imposes a hefty fee on all American vehicles entering the province on the Alaska Highway. This policy has sparked a heated debate on both sides of the border. The tolls, which vary depending on the size and type of vehicle, have significantly increased the cost of transporting goods to Alaska. For instance, a large truck now faces a toll that can exceed several $100s, adding a substantial burden to the logistics of moving goods. Trucking companies, already grappling with rising fuel prices and driver shortages, are particularly hard hit, forcing many to pass on the added costs to consumers. This has led to higher prices for everyday goods in Alaska, from groceries to construction materials, affecting the cost of living for residents. The Canadian government defends the tolls as a necessary measure to protect its own interests. Officials argue that the tolls are a fair way to ensure that American vehicles contribute to the maintenance and improvement of the highways they use. They argue that the revenue generated from the tolls will be used to fund infrastructure projects and mitigate the economic impact of U.S. tariffs. These projects include road repairs, bridge maintenance, and other critical infrastructure improvements that benefit both Canadian and American travelers. Moreover, they claim that the tolls are simply a way of leveling the playing field, as the U.S. has long imposed tolls on Canadian vehicles at certain border crossings. This reciprocal approach, they say, ensures fairness and mutual respect in cross-border transportation policies. However, critics argue that the tolls are discriminatory and disproportionately harm Alaska, which relies heavily on the Alaska Highway for its economic survival. They point out that the increased costs of transportation are leading to supply chain disruptions, resulting in empty shelves and higher prices for essential goods in Alaskan stores. This, they argue, is an unfair burden on a region already facing unique economic challenges. Alaska feels the pinch economic impacts and supply chain disruptions. The impact of the tolls is being felt across Alaska. Businesses are struggling to cope with rising costs, forcing many to raise prices or cut back on operations. Consumers are facing sticker shock at grocery stores and gas stations as the cost of essential goods continues to climb. The tourism industry, a vital part of Alaska's economy, is also bracing for a downturn as potential visitors reconsider their travel plans due to the added expense and uncertainty. The tolls have exposed the fragility of Alaska's supply chain and its dependence on the Alaska Highway. With limited options for transporting goods, Alaska is particularly vulnerable to disruptions in the flow of supplies. The situation has highlighted the need for greater diversification and investment in alternative transportation routes, such as seaports and airports, to reduce Alaska's reliance on a single road corridor. Political backlash tensions rise on both sides of the border. The recent imposition of tolls at the U.S. Canada border has sparked outrage and frustration among Alaskans. Many feel caught in the crossfire of a trade war that they did not start and have no control over. The tolls, which were introduced as a measure to protect Canadian jobs and industries, have instead created a significant burden for Alaskan citizens who frequently cross the border for work, shopping, and family visits. Lawmakers from both parties have condemned the tolls, calling on the U.S. government to take swift action to resolve the dispute. They argue that the tolls are unfair and place an undue burden on Alaskan residents. In a rare show of bipartisanship, both Democratic and Republican lawmakers have united in their opposition to the tolls, urging the federal government to intervene and negotiate a resolution with Canada. Some have even called for retaliatory measures, such as imposing tariffs on Canadian goods entering Alaska. These lawmakers believe that strong action is necessary to show Canada that the United States will not tolerate unfair trade practices. They argue that imposing tariffs on Canadian goods could pressure the Canadian government to reconsider the tolls and seek a more equitable solution. In addition to calls for tariffs, there have been growing movements among Alaskan citizens to boycott Canadian products altogether. Protests have been organized and social media campaigns have gained traction, encouraging residents to avoid purchasing goods made in Canada. This grassroots movement aims to hit Canada economically and force a change in policy. The issue has also become a political football in Canada, with the opposition criticizing the government's handling of the trade dispute. They argue that the tolls are counterproductive and will only serve to escalate tensions with the United States. The opposition claims that the government's approach is short-sighted and could have long-term negative consequences for Canadian businesses and the economy. They argue that the tolls are counterproductive and will only serve to escalate tensions with the United States. The opposition has been vocal in their criticism, holding press conferences and making public statements to highlight the potential dangers of the current policy. They believe that a more diplomatic approach is needed to resolve the trade dispute without harming the relationship between the two countries. Furthermore, they point out that the tolls could harm Canadian businesses that rely on trade with Alaska. Many Canadian business owners have expressed concern about the impact of the tolls on their operations. Some have already reported a decline in sales and fear that the situation could worsen if the trade dispute continues. The opposition argues that the government should prioritize the interests of Canadian businesses and seek a resolution that benefits both countries. Despite the criticism, the Canadian government has so far refused to back down, insisting that the tolls are necessary to protect Canadian jobs and industries. Government officials have defended the policy, stating that it is a necessary measure to ensure the economic stability of the country. They argue that the tolls are a fair response to the trade practices of the United States and that Canada must take a strong stance to protect its interests. The government remains firm in its position, even as tensions continue to rise on both sides of the border.